Let's welcome, please, to the stage our conversation with Studio General Manager and VP of Creative for Wizards of the Coast, Leah Hoyer. See, told you.
Yeah.
Told you she's going to be doing that.
I'm practicing for this evening. Hello, all.
Once again, we are in these posture forward chairs. We
And
rip
I'm
on
mindful,
the chairs.
the video up there reminds me, we did a tech check yesterday, and I was like, hey, yeah, these chairs are not that easy to sit on.
Yeah, I think we're saying these are sustainable, as you know, they're made of cardboard, so they can become a heat source later, or a food source perhaps. If we boil them down, a little salt, who's going to know? So, Leah, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. Before we start, Leah's been busy, just got back from a nice long holiday, and she chose to forego the jet lag, come straight through and celebrating her birthday.
I did.
So I think we should all wish Leah a happy birthday.
Thanks.
But let's talk about why we were really here. Why don't you give us a little personal resume, a little journey about, who's Leah? What makes her tick?
Okay, well, I have a dog, and he's my favorite thing. My journey. I think like most people, there's no one normal way to get into the games industry, and I'm no exception to that. So I used to be a lawyer, and that was great and all, but it didn't really suit me. And so I decided that I'd always loved animation, and I went back to school. And wound up then working at Disney, developing animated TV shows for probably the better part of a decade. So it was sort of the era I worked on everything from like Recess was the first one that I worked on, and Kim Possible, Phineas and Ferb, that sort of thing, and developing shows. It's always amusing to see the reactions, because it used to be the case that people are like, oh, my kids loved those shows.
Yeah.
Now there's enough people in the industry that's like, oh, Kim Possible was my favorite. I'm like, oh God, I feel so old. But my role was really to find the ideas and to bring people together and to build up the teams, and to then help shepherd them to make sure that they met the needs of Disney, whether it be ABC in the States or Disney Channel and the like. And that, I think, really transferred over to so much of what I do now. But it also gave me the inroads to video games, because my role also within Disney, as you can imagine, if you've got a pretty big hit, they want to do everything with it. Like the Disney is sort of the king of synergy and transmedia and all that sort of stuff. And so you get something like Phineas and Ferb that's doing really well, and they want to not only, make bed sheets and Happy Meal toys and the like, but they'll always do something interactive. And the people who I would build up the team of folks to make the show, but that was their focus. So I would wind up being almost in many ways the brand manager. Right. And so for pretty much any show that we made, we'd at least do a web-based game. It might just be a reskinning of some driving game that you had for something else, but the more popular ones, we'd start to do things on like DS and console, and even got to do a few very amazing immersive projects with Imagineering that happened in the theme parks or on some cruise ships. And once I really got to see that part of making content, it wasn't so lean back in the way that TV was, but you could help tell a story with a player and you could immerse them in the world. Like, I was totally hooked. And one of the things that we did for Epcot Center wound up winning some awards and gaining some recognition, and Xbox gave me a call and was like, hey, would you want to come over here and work in narrative? And at that point, I'm actually from Seattle originally, so the chance to move back, still work on things that reach many, many people around the world, which is a huge part, I think, of why a lot of us do what we do. Right. But also to be more on the cutting edge of what can awesome storytelling be, what can really amazing immersive entertainment be. Right. It was just something that I had to do. And then since then, I've gone on and worked at a variety of places in the industry. But I think last year crossed over to more time now in the video games industry than I was in TV. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is talking about going from animation land at Disney, and then ending up in narrative. How do you do that? How do you go from like a craft like animation and start to develop what the narrative skill set is? How do you do transition there?
You know what? To be honest, that to me was the part that just happened naturally. In part because TV and film are basically made to tell stories, right? Like that is what they do, and that is what they do at their core. It's what they do extremely well. And so by just virtue of, literally I worked on 25 shows that made it to air and many, many more that didn't in sort of that development process. You just really start to understand character and emotional resonance and the sort of the ebb and flow of what a story needs to do is just baked in to TV. Now, the really interesting part, I think, when you move out of linear, and this is something that I think the industry is absolutely aware of, but still very much learning, is how do you get out of that mindset that you're telling someone a story in interactive, and how do you involve them in that process? How do you make it something that they feel like is no longer the author or that auteur's story? It is their story. And that's the really important part. And I think that was something that I always just really enjoyed that challenge, and that's been the way that I've sort of focused on a lot of my work in games, particularly the narrative stuff. I've since sort of broadened beyond that, but it's still the place that I have this extra passion for really immersive, compelling narrative, and just ways that you're not trying to, with your game, just tell someone something, because movies do that. I am not, honestly, the biggest proponent of a lot of cinematics in your game. I think that they can be, when they're used really well. But there are times when, you're in there and you're playing, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I guess I get to sit here now for maybe too long of an amount of time because someone just wants to tell me, give me a big info dump. And, but that's not to say, like, I worked at Telltale. I was their head of creative for a couple of years. Rest in peace, Telltale. And that's not the only way to do it, though. Obviously, it very much embraced that. But that is the sort of choice and pathways and various things that are there. But there's just even more. I don't know. There's so much more we can do in the immersive storytelling world. And that's the kind of thing that I, even with our current project that we're working on at Wizards, it's very much thinking about how do you do that with player and how do you do that with players, which is something that I don't think the industry's done really well yet, is tell stories in a multiplayer environment that don't feel like a single player story. There's just so many great, frontiers that we have to kind of improve upon in these spaces, and those are the fun challenges that often get me up in the morning.
Yeah, and even the people that make the game, right? The narrative is so important for them on that journey, right? Because, sure, the narrative, the story you want to, here's a story you want to tell, and you're looking to the consumer, but also the people that make the game have to understand what is the story that they're trying to tell, because they're going to have influence on how that is going to be put together. Absolutely,
and every element, and I think that's the just guiding principle that game teams need to work by, is every element, every person who's working on that game has an impact on what the story is. Because you tell story with the colors you choose. You tell story with the music that you have. You definitely tell story through your marketing campaign. You tell story through, all of those. You tell story with your control scheme. And so, every discipline and every person who's working there has the ability to have that, to have an impact on it, but also just to let that story shine and let the world that you are creating there shine. And story is just so powerful in games. I mean, that very often, especially with a crowd like this, oftentimes what'll happen is I'll get the question from studios who are very used to working with other studios on their projects, and they're interested in making that transition from doing service work for other companies to potentially making their own projects. And honestly, one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give is do not underestimate the power of the story world you're creating, and particularly the characters who are there. I mean, the entire video games industry can learn more about character, I will say, but at the same time, that's what people respond to. That's what they resonate with. Those are, just from the basic idea of you almost never, Portal maybe being an exception, but you almost never put a game mechanic on a t-shirt, right? You put a character on a t-shirt. You put those sorts of things that you connect with, someone that you either admire or you feel like represents who you are. And the story moments in the game, and those might be very wrapped up in gameplay, they should be, but those are the things that you talk to with your friends around oh my goodness, did you get to this part yet? This part is so cool. Those are all based on how much you have that emotional resonance with the game, which is all based on the world, how much you care. Really at the core of it, do you care about this world? And you care about the world because of the characters that are in it. You care about the world because of the challenges that they and you, the player, are going through. And yeah, it's the sort of thing that when everyone on the team is aware of that, you're really able to create something magical and create something that feels integrated and immersive.
Yeah. And really finding your affiliation with the characters and or the subject matter. And don't think it's not lost on me that you may not have noticed that Leah is wearing Rebel Alliance earrings. And her name's Leah. So we're going to call her Leah now. This is getting weird.
I will say I am old enough now, thanks birthday, that I remember what it was like before that franchise came out, and no one mispronounced my name. But yeah, I have an affinity there. I am a member of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. So yeah.
Nicely done. Yeah, I was just going to say, wait a minute, you pulled your hair back and all that. I can see what you're doing there.
It's true.
So let's shift a little bit to starting up a new studio, because that's exactly what you're doing. Tell me about that journey.
Great. So Wizards of the Coast, I think there's a growing awareness of the fact that Wizards obviously is known very much for its tabletop worlds, things like Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons, these small little franchises that exist. And they have such a storied history of physical goods and tabletop gaming. And really, for at least the last decade, have, of course, been working more in the digital space, starting off, of course, with how do we translate the mechanics of the tabletop into a digital game. So, things like Magic the Gathering Arena is wildly popular, and it's great. But we're also looking towards, we see that as a major growth area for the company. And the company being not just Wizards, but Wizards of the Coast is owned by Hasbro, as many of you may know, which of course has a ton of awesome franchises that you can dive into and play around in. And so we're really making a push into that space, both to diversify our portfolio, because one of the things I'm doing is working on brand new IP that I think lives nicely in the Wizards world because of the kinds of things that we hold on to, like multiplayer and self-expression and creativity and those kind of things, but definitely strays away from some of the other things, like we don't have any Dungeons or Dragons in our game. Well, we might have some dungeons, we'll see. But at the end of the day, we're doing some new IP. We're absolutely broadening the sense of what could we do with the other amazing IP that we have. In particular, Dungeons and Dragons is such an amazingly awesome world. We're coming out with a movie in the near future. We're doing all these, the the space that you can play in from an IP and storytelling standpoint, to sort of bring it back to that, and the ways in which you can play in that world. There's so much that you can do from a digital extension side of it, and we're really exploring that more, as well as, you know, it's been announced there's a studio on the East Coast out in the Raleigh area that's working on the G.I. Joe franchise, making a video game out there. So this is an area that we're really expanding into. I was approached by Wizards about 2 years ago now, started late 2021. Started late 2021. No, goodness, what are years? I'll blame this on jet lag. Started late 2020. Yeah, so almost 2 years ago, I was brought in as the first employee of a new studio within there. And really, since then, we've now built up our team internally to 10 people. We, earlier this year, back in May, after spending a lot of time doing ideation and working on various things, moved out of incubation and are now working on our first project that is going to, be coming out at some point in the future. It is still early, so we don't have any dates or anything to launch on that, but that's exciting. And, a big part of why I'm excited to come to XDS, why I'm excited to have conversations with folks and the like is, of course, we are building up our own studio. We are making our game, but we're now in a world where it's not possible to just start from no people, and think that you're going to build up an entire team of people to make a game in any reasonable amount of time, on any reasonable budget and the like. And so we have grown internally. We will continue to do so over the next couple of years, but we are also really looking to augment our team and doing that smartly and finding the right partners for that. And that's a big part of, what we're excited about doing, but also, the kind of things that it's been interesting to see, because over the course of my video game career, I've been matching teams up with partners for quite some time, and it's interesting to see how it's changing, and what it is that you look for.
Well, it's almost like when you have either a specialty device or anything, that you take it to the people that know how to do that work, right? I think a lot of us can see that video games, when you've been doing it a long time, we're just going to start a video game studio. We're going to hire all the people we need to make this game, and it's going to go swimmingly, and there's not going to be any problems. We're going to hit all our milestones, and nothing's going to go wrong. And then you realize, oh my God, we have nobody that does really good UX, or we don't have anybody that does good lighting, or what have you. And then instead of just running out and hiring a bunch of people and wasting all this time trying to find someone to make a full-time employee on board them and go through. Myself included, we've often turned to outsourcing to say, look, let's go find the experts in the field. It's almost like a medical profession. You go to your general practitioner, they say this is what you need to get done, and then you go to the specialist. And so I like to think of external developers as specialists that are available when you need them, and sometimes you need them for a long time, sometimes you don't. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to me also, the thing that I see as changing so much is even that sense of, I don't know, in many ways the word outsourcing to me is starting to get kind of dated. Like there's just that real sense of, particularly, and one thing that I think is very cool is over the last 3 years, we've all learned more or less how to work with one another when we're not in the same place, right? Because we are all external developers right now. Exactly, in a really different way than had been before. And so what that has done, because our technologies and our comfort level with virtual meetings and with dispersed teams and all of that has grown so much, I think essentially is changing the nature of ways that you work with folks who aren't full-time employees, and so the opportunity there to truly partner with other companies and other groups, other people, to augment your team is greater than it's ever been. So we, as we're looking for the folks who are going to help us make our game, ideally we want to be thinking about them as
an extension of our team, not as something other. That idea in the past where you'd be like, okay, we're going to send you a brief and give you something to do for the next 2 months. You're going to send it back to us. We're going to tell you it's not good enough and send it back to you. And you're going to keep going back and forth as we throw something back and forth over a wall.
Right.
It's just so dated. It's never been effective, let's be honest. And so the more that we can dive into actual relationships where it's feeling like we are one team, the better. And I just think we're at a really different, we're in a different space with a different mindset that is making that so much more possible now. So I'm very excited about the conversations that we've been having with people about how do we integrate your skill set, like you said, your specializations into our team to make it feel like you're now not the group we hire to do UX. You are our UX team. And how do we make that work?
And you talked about, you and I, when we were chatting yesterday, talked about the need for the more frequent interaction with these people. Not like, okay, it's our monthly check-in. How's all that rendering we asked you to do? It's like you have
Would you ever just check in monthly with anyone on your team?
Right.
Of course not, right? Like that's not the way that works. And so, we, are starting to get contracts in place to work with certain folks, and if they are these long-term things, there are times when you do, of course, just hire someone to do, say, maybe some concept art for a while, and they'll come back 6 weeks later and do stuff, and you have a little more back and forth. And then there's times when you're like, hey, we're going to need a lot of this. Now you get our style, and we're going to start to dive into that space where this is more of our concept art team. Well, okay, you want them to have access to your Confluence and your Perforce and your Slack channels or whatever it is that you're, working on, so that it's not the monthly check-in. It's probably not even the weekly check-in. We should be chatting, as much as possible.
And that changes the relationship too, right? It's a different relationship when you have a developer that you're working with, that you have that regular cadence of communication. And I think it actually improves the quality of the product because they feel like they're actually part of the team. They've got some skin in the game.
Completely. And I will say there's obviously therefore greater opportunity for companies who do provide those sorts of services to come in and feel like they're more integrated, come and feel like they're empowered to do better work and feel like they're empowered to be more part of the team. I think that's awesome. The flip side of that is I think it also comes with a greater responsibility and a need to think a little differently about the sort of things that you look for in a partnership, because I think in the past, a lot of times you just really looked at the technical capabilities of these teams. And it's like, hey, are they good at lighting? Are they good at, rendering and textures or whatever it was that you were going to them for? And maybe you'd think about things like, how many time zones are they away from us? Like, there are a few of those things that you'd look at. But now, because we want people to come in and augment our team, and really feel like they're part of our team, I think what we've realized is that we're spending a lot of time also talking with studios bluntly on a more emotional level. Like, do they share our values?
Yes.
Do they, are they excited about our product? Are they excited about the why we're making our product in the same way that we are? Because, I wouldn't hire a full-time person onto our team who wasn't at least pretty excited about what it was that we were making, didn't feel like it resonated with them, because they want to make that type of game, and so the same thing goes with the studios that we're looking at is, hey, are you excited about this product? We're not making a shoot 'em in the face game. And I'm happy that we're not making it. There are great shoot 'em in the face games out there, lots of fans for shoot 'em in the face games. But if you're gonna come and work with us, if your passion is shoot 'em in the face games, it's probably better that you work with a different studio who's also passionate about shoot 'em in the face games, And there's that side of the fit. And then there's the other side of it, which also is I'm pretty proud to say that out of our 10 people, we are actually over 50%. women or non-binary.
Yes.
Like, we have and we value diversity in our team. We
Absolutely.
value that a lot. We value diversity of experience. We value diversity of opinion on things. And therefore, it's also important to us to pair up with a team of folks that are also going to have those same values. Because if our team that is a pocket of 10 growing to 15 growing to 20 folks that's there all of a sudden gets 15 new people in, that completely changes the sort of balance or demographics or mindset of the team. That's not going to be healthy for anyone. And so we all of those pieces, that it's like we're not just looking for the technical, we're looking for the emotional resonance, we're looking for the EQ side of it, we're looking for all of that as well. Those become qualities that are just as important for us in finding the right partners.
I think we just developed a new genre now. It's you're not working on an RTS, you're working on an SIF, which is shoot in the face.
Shoot him in the face.
Shoot him in the face. I'm glad you said that, Leah. The very small bit I will say is that my studio is just over 52% women now, I think. And it's not because we set a target for that. It's just that our message, our vision, and what we talked about has attracted those people. And it struck me, I was on a call the other day with a partner, and it was one of those Zoom calls with like 16 people on there. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm an old white guy, and I was looking at 15 versions of me. And it was really weird because I have not seen that, because our calls with all of our team are not like that. And it really struck me how far a lot of the studios and companies are coming now, where it's not just, the norm to see all the old white guys working on something. And so I think it's important that, as you said, you try harder. And I like the fact that, like you, we look for partners that share our values as well, right? Because I think that makes a better game. I think it makes a better product and better communication. How has that been? Has it been challenging? Has it been hard to find partners that kind of share that?
It's always hard to find exactly the right fit, right? And I think as I'm sure everyone in this room is aware of, the other thing that's very much hit our industry over the last several years is a real adjustment to hiring and to that sense of finding external partners. The ability for people to work remotely means they have so many more choices of where they can go. And so from an individual hiring standpoint, I know we're all facing just new challenges and a new way of going about that, having to step up on the flexibility side to attract the right people. And from a studio partnership, working with someone in an external distributed development capacity, bluntly, so many of the studios that 5 years ago were independent have been bought up by somebody else, right? Like that's just the reality of our world these days. And so then there's a smaller group of folks that are available to be able to work on your projects. And what that can often mean is that the prices go up. You have to wait longer for it. You have to do those sorts of things. If you're finding, you might find the right fit and they're like, great, we've got availability in February. And then you have to decide, is that good enough for us? Or do we have to go with someone who's maybe an 80% fit rather than a 92% fit? And I do think that when we do make the call, also, yes, let's wait 3 months to be able to work with this team because we feel like they're exactly the right team. What it also does is on our end, kind of raises the bar for what the expectations are for that time when we can finally work with that group of people. Because if we're, paying you 30% more than we would have 18 months ago, and we've waited 3 or 4 months, while, yes, that is the going rate of things, I think in our minds there's also that sense of okay, this better be worth it because we've waited for so long. So the dynamics of that relationship have just changed entirely. But yeah, it's never easy. I wouldn't say, though, it's been impossible, and in part it's because I'm very excited about what it is that we're making. And so when we get the chance to sit down and pitch it to people and pitch it to partners, and you understand what it is that that we're working on, and you find those people who are really excited about not the shoot 'em in the face game. And they go, yay, okay, well, we're really excited about this. This is cool. This is something that I want to play. It's something I'd love to play with my family, or it's something I'd love to play with my friends. And that has actually been one of our bigger things. Like you were saying, it's like when you talk about like the kinds of things that you're excited about, then it's really easy to look for that shared excitement, you know, so.
Yesterday, you and I talked about the power of the independents, the little independent studios, right? And how, you know, they're so in demand.
They really are, yeah.
You know?
Absolutely, for exactly that reason that there are certainly, you know, plenty of potential partners that are, you know, owned by some bigger umbrella company, or sometimes even owned by like some of the big players like Sony or EA or what have you, but they are able to do work for others, and that's great as long as we can trust that they're going to continue to be available to do work for others. And that's just part of our risk assessment, right? Anytime we go into thinking about what the right partnership might be. Whereas when people are less tethered to that bigger thing, then it gets really exciting for us to be like, okay, yeah, come really partner with us. Be our arm in this area, and that's exciting. So the more that we know that we've got that real connection and relationship, it just really goes back to that. Like that's it's a thing that I don't know that I felt with a ton of the outsourcing folks 7 or 8 years ago, because of just the nature of the way that was done. And now again, if you can come in and feel like, yeah, we're on the same side, we're on the same team, and that's great. Those small studios, maybe they only do 1 or 2 things, but they do them really well. Like there's a lot of power in that right now.
Yeah, we talked about paying for quality and paying for that experience, but expecting that quality and experience in return.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, we're up here, we're talking, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people going, how do I get in front of the wizards? Is there a Wizards Council I must go through, or is it just, are we just making fun of the name?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a Wizards Council. No, the truth is Wizards themselves are indeed in need of finding those right partners. Like I was talking about at the top of this, it is a area that we are growing into. There was a great kind of very brief but overview recap article that anyone can look up. It was a quick interview with Tim Fields, our relatively new SVP of digital gaming, and he was sort of going over the studios, like the one that I work on, as well as some of our other studios, and the internal just emphasis on digital for both Wizards and Hasbro. And so it's something I would, you know, just Google that, check it out, and you can kind of see what's going on there. But yeah, everything from finding partners in all the various disciplines to help us make the first party games, like the things that I'm working on, as well as our second party, or working on things that we want to come up with internally, but we are not going to be the main developer on. And then the occasional even licensed product that can come up with something in particular, like D&D is an area that we just feel can be tapped so much more. And all of those are opportunities. And, you know, if you've got the right thing, I know, you know, I'm certainly here right now. We do have a biz dev group that is actively looking for those, and you're probably in touch with some of the folks there. My colleague, Ben Camerano, I'm also going to call you out because he is here having a ton of meetings with folks and sharing a little more on the details of what it is that we're looking for. But there are opportunities, and yeah, I will also take this moment to apologize to the 57 people who sent me, hey, can we meet at XDS things? And in my time over in Europe, not really checking my notifications that those were coming up. So I opened the app last night and started responding to some of those. So, you know, my time here isn't super long, but there's also, you know, it's not like Wizards is going anywhere.
No.
So just know that there are real opportunities for us, and as there are with only every company that is making games, there are big opportunities to be working
totally.
with right now.
I will apologize too. Chris didn't tell me that he'd activated the button to say Ask Joe stuff, and then I did the same thing. I went, oh, so I'm not. I apologize if I've been a jerk about that.
Yeah, I was 9 hours ahead and I was trying to make a concerted effort. All of my notifications from XDS were going to my work email, and the folks at the work team knew how to get in touch with me so that I was trying to take my disconnect downtime while I was away. And then, when I was like, oh, there's an app. I should look at that. Oh, goodness, I'm so sorry. But yeah.
So we're a couple minutes away from throwing the rubber mic out so you can ask Leah some questions. But one thing that we talked about, I think is just an interesting topic. Wizards of the Coast, everybody knows it for D&D. It's D&D, D&D. It's like everybody knows that. But we talked about the onboarding experience to a D&D thing, because everyone has their different experience. I mean, I grew up as a kid playing D&D.
Totally.
But then there was also, some people may have not even heard of it until Stranger Things came out. And so there's everything in between. So
Totally.
we talked about the onboarding and how important that is.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that we have embraced digital so much, because actually if you look at one thing that I love about Wizards of the Coast, one of the reasons that I took the job and that I am working there, is because it is a core value of Wizards that they make games that are more fun to play together. Mm-hmm. They make games that bring people together and that create communities around the globe, right?
Yep.
And the things that there's an awesomeness about that. The sometimes drawback of that from a games perspective and getting new fans is that neither Magic the Gathering nor Dungeons and Dragons are solitaire games, right? So you cannot play D&D without other people. I mean, you can, but that's about the saddest experience ever. So, it's the kind of thing, and if you're new to it, it can be just kind of intimidating. Let's be honest. There's both the sense of there's a perception that it's hard to learn because there are these numbers and stats, and there's a sheet with all these boxes, and I've got to pick a class, and what does a class mean? And I've got to, all of that. Bluntly, D&D is a game that is designed for people to not lose, right? No one is made better off if you don't actually succeed at your campaign. And that's sort of the core secret of D&D. But in order for you to realize that, you need a friend. You need someone who knows what they're doing and who invites you into their world and who shows you and has a little bit of patience with you to do that. And so the digital space is something that we really see as a place that both you can learn more about it in that lower stress environment where you're not showing up thinking, well, what if I'm not? It's almost like going to an improv group, right? What if I'm not funny? What if I'm not... what if I don't have the best ideas as I'm sitting here with this? Or what if I don't know what I'm doing? And then also, it's the chance to sort of learn about the world more and understand how flexible it is and understand that there's a place in a D&D universe for everyone, right? And so that is what we're kind of looking to do, not therefore just to make D&D versions of how to play D&D digitally, but how do you open up the world?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, now's the point where we're asked for Vanna White to come out and give us our
yay.
lovely rubber mic. There she is.
Throw the cube.
Galia, thank you. If you haven't seen this mic, if you're here yesterday, you know how fun it is to throw. Here's the deal with the mic. If there is an actual microphone on the end of this thing that you have to be mindful of. So when you get this microphone, you have to talk into the microphone, right? Again, we said yesterday, if you sit in your lap, the microphone will pick up a lot of weird shit that you don't want to hear. So while we've got Leah here, do we have any questions for her in the last few minutes?
Oh, come on.
There we go.
I like the pity question coming from the organizer of the,
I'll break the ice, and I need to ask at least one question this week, so I'll start with you. And thank you so much for joining us, coming all this way from Seattle.
Yeah, it was so far.
So I'm really glad you mentioned the importance of the values match between, in your partnerships. We actually, Nikki Roth ran a table topic all around that subject yesterday, and people had some very open and honest conversation around the importance and the advantages of that. So I know you don't like softball questions, so maybe we'll see.
Hardball
We'll see what you
questions.
have to say. But what happens when you go into engagement and you thought there was a values match, or you're hoping for that, and you find maybe down the road, well, maybe that synergy wasn't necessarily there, or maybe it wasn't values, maybe it was from a quality perspective. So how do you deal with that situation? Is there a good way to mediate that, or even if you find yourself in a breakup situation, how do you best manage or work through that? Honestly,
especially because, like we were talking about, the relationship has gotten so much closer. It's gotten so much more like a team. We handle that as much as possible like we would handle any kind of difficulty you might be having with someone who is a full-time member of your team. It's the best thing to do is not avoid the hard conversation, right? Is to sit down, have those discussions with folks about the expectations. Okay, let's make sure that it's not our fault, because the first step very often is for us to then look at what are we not doing that we could be doing more of, right? And the biggest thing for folks is everyone wants to understand what is expected of them for something. So let's clarify that. Let's make sure that that's really clear. Sit down, make sure we're in really deep agreement about what the expectations are for those. And then if that continues from those conversations that are about like, hey, we need you to be at this level and we're not getting this, or we need A, B, and C, and B is just not there. Those kind of conversations. You have to give it time to remedy, right, and improve. But if it doesn't, then that's when we start to be like, okay, look, let's talk about this. And it, again, comes back to it's a partnership. So very often, if it's not working for us, quite often it's because it's also not working for the other side. That's just, it's sort of the nature of when those things start to go off the rails. Oftentimes it is because there's something that we hadn't sussed out at the beginning that is more of an issue. And we can work on potentially addressing that particular issue. Maybe it is that there are the wrong people within whatever company we're working on assigned to this thing, and there could be folks within that are a better fit. Or if not, it is so much better to rip the Band-Aid off earlier. I mean, that's just, if there's a lesson I've learned in my career, it is just don't avoid the hard conversation, and when you kind of get that sense that it's not going to get better, then you do the ripping the Band-Aid off. And the nice thing about Wizards is that we do have so many other things going on, and we've got so many things that are in different, different genres, different types of games and the like, that it may not even be that, oh, hey, look, you and Wizards aren't a fit. It might be you and our project aren't a fit. There's those pieces too. So, we'll look at some other options there. Is it possible to take the contract that we've made here and potentially apply it to something else that feels like it's a better fit? And then if not, that's unfortunately why you put various remedies and breakup clauses into contracts, right? That's when I channeled that lawyer brain that I made, a long time ago. But hopefully we can avoid getting it to that part. Anything else?
Cool. Anybody else got a question?
Alrighty.
All right. Going once?
Just going to practice my dance moves. Yeah. No?
All right. Well,
cool.
Please join me in thanking Leah for making the
Thanks,
journey
all.
up. And we are going to take a break now, and next session will be up at 11. So we will see you then.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, folks.